11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence starts. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes.
Bienvenue au DevFest Nantes. Je suis Julien, je fais partie des 8 organisateurs qui organisons ça depuis plus d'un an. Bienvenue au DevFest Nantes, bienvenue à Nantes. C'est super cool d'être aussi nombreux ce matin. Cette année, du coup, on est 1800 par jour, vraiment pour 2 jours intenses, juste avant les vacances pour certains. Le DevFest, c'est donc 8 organisateurs, mais c'est surtout 60 bénévoles d'Epitech et de Supinfo qui nous aident au montage, au démontage et pendant toute la journée. Donc merci de les applaudir, s'il vous plaît. Le DevFest aussi, c'est grâce à des sponsors qui nous aident du coup à avoir une billetterie intéressante, à pas cher. Donc je tenais à remercier spécifiquement du coup Creative, Winepoint, Epitech, Google, Talent, Sphere, Zenica, Abside, VPTech, Capgemini, Niji, Concerto et Nantes Saint-Nazaire Développement. Merci de les applaudir. Je ne sais pas si vous avez fait le tour des stands, mais nos sponsors ont réservé des sacrées surprises, notamment dans le sac de goodies, notamment dans leur animation. Et en parlant d'animation, nous avons aussi pas mal de surprises au second étage en association avec le Planétarium de Nantes. Donc il y a pas mal de choses à regarder, à checker. Voilà. N'hésitez pas à faire un petit tour et à vous balader pendant les conférences et faire une petite pause sur les aspects techniques. Le DevFest, c'est aussi du coup un contenu qu'on essaye de qualité tous les ans. Donc cette année, nous avons 82 speakers venus pour certains de très loin. L'idée, c'est vraiment, pendant ces 2 jours, d'avoir 70 sessions, que ce soit des Code Labs, des conférences, et vraiment que vous preniez plaisir du coup, dans toutes les conférences que vous allez voir, d'un point de vue technique, mais pas que. Merci d'applaudir tous les speakers qui sont venus. Et pour continuer cette keynote, je vais passer juste en anglais pour accueillir notre speaker de keynote. Welcome to the DevFest Nantes. Please welcome Chris Heilmann, a man who spent 20 years in web development. Please welcome Chris.
Bonjour. Dun, dun, dun. Okay. Woohoo. Hey. Good morning. I'm sorry my talk is not in French. I do understand French, but I don't speak it well, and I do speak it with a German accent, and I didn't want to do that to you, because that's not nice to do to people. I realize also I have half an hour, and I planned for longer, so I'm going to be fast. So if you don't understand me, if I speak too fast, life is cruel, and you have to deal with it. I want to talk about the space that we're exploring as developers, as makers of the web and makers of software. And I want to talk about how we kind of get too excited about our things and being the innovators of the next thing, of the next thing, of the next thing. But we actually realize that we're leaving a lot of mess behind, and we're not leaving a healthy work environment to get into. So I want to talk about a few things that I encountered and a few things that might help you to get started better and actually to get your your new people that start in your company to hit the ground running rather than making the same mistakes that we had to do to actually go where we are right now. So, welcome makers of our space. If you don't know what that is the Pioneer plaque. And that is what the Pioneer spacecraft was basically had on it to explain to aliens what humans are like and where we can be found. So the first thing we did for interstellar travel is send them nude pictures of us and our address. So in terms of security, we're not the best people. But it's quite fun that I don't understand what the hell and all these things are, but when you read through it, you realize there's actually lots of clever information how this should be understandable for anybody who doesn't speak our languages. And it's kind of the same with coding. I think coding to me should be for everybody. Everybody should be allowed to code, but not everybody is a coder, or not everybody needs to be a coder to have a job. When we talk about automation and we talk about machine learning, everybody's like, you're going to be a coder, then you have a safe job. And you're like, we're also getting automated already to a degree, so it's kind of weird. I love that there's this 11-year-old kid that can actually write JavaScript to program her Joule bots to do some great stuff. It's also that coding gives you a second chance. There's lots of stories of people who actually were in prison and taught themselves programming in prison and got a job afterwards. And that is great when you can use something as amazing as programming to actually go back into society rather than being the antisocial developer somewhere in the corner that nobody wants to talk to. So what's wrong with coding? There's actually nothing wrong with coding, or null, or undefined, or empty string, or empty array, or false, or not a number. There are many things that are good about coding, and there are a few things that we do false with it, or we do wrong with it. And I'm actually more worried about the perception of coding. Coding is seen as everybody who learns to code will have a great, fulfilling job. I've done it for 20 years. I've got bad news for you. It's not always a great, fulfilling job. We have to make our job and make our voice heard in the company as well. There's also a danger that people who just learn to code will write live products that people trust with their information and trust with their data. And we're very much not aware of the mistakes that we make when we start out. And later on, we might be arrogant enough not to realize our mistakes. And hype isn't good. We're not professionals. We're professionals. We're not miracle workers. We have to actually be seen as somebody who does a job and has to learn our job as well. We're always like, oh, we know everything because we're up to date, and we spend like 60 hours every night on Stack Overflow to keep up to date. And that's unhealthy. That's stupid. We have to have a normal life next to our coding life as well. So the coder of today is kind of, to me, the astronaut of the 50s, where everybody wanted to become an astronaut, and that's the cool thing to do. And now being the coder is the cool thing to do. I was in America in a bookstore, you know, bookstores where homeless people wash their clothes, or other people buy things on Amazon. It's basically, that was the main coding book that they had there, Cracking the Coding Interview. Not learning a language, not building interfaces, not changing the world. How do you actually get through a coding interview without knowing how to code? And this is already how we're cheating that market, and it drives me crazy. Next to it was the picture of Elon Musk, of course. So an astronaut with job security and actually no physical demands, because being an astronaut is not easy. You have to be physically fit, you have to know about everything. But we, like with coders, it's like, you know what, you can learn this in 2 hours and then you get a job. And to a degree it works. I mean, I love this, like the GitHub getting a job offer, the GitHub bot getting a job offer, because bots go through GitHub and talk to other bots, so that's quite fun. But if we look closely, things look bad. There's actually, we're becoming much more aware that like for 50, 60 years, we wrote terrible, terrible code and hope nobody realizes it. Or we really had bad environments that only did a certain thing and that code is out there. When I learned, for example, that the ICBM silos in England, like the the rocket launching silos, have a security code that's 4 numbers, that's not good. We should have upgraded that in between, but it's still the case. So there's a great article about the coming software apocalypse where it shows that most software isn't faulty, but has been written with false assumptions. And sometimes that means, in this case, a great example is that 911 wasn't reachable in Chicago for like 2 hours because somebody made a simple coding mistake of not allocating enough space. And we actually start to realize the mess that we created herself. Nikita Prokopov, I think, just wrote a great article about that, how he's basically disenchanted after 5 years of development that all we do is rubbish, that all we do is terrible. I don't agree with everything he says, but there's some really good points in there. So we always see ourselves as craftsmen, as like writers of amazing code, and we're going to write that one algorithm to make it right. And that's only 3.62% of what we do. I made that number up in case you wonder. We think we build these Chippendale furniture, we're these beautiful craftsmen, but in essence what we need to build is IKEA Billies, because that's what people want. The average website, all of them look the same, and all of them, people expect the same things. We have a certain amount of margin where we can be creative, and we got to make sure that those Billies are easy to build, are cheap to dismantle, are cheap to rebuild, and are actually making sense to send from one person to another. I think it started really simple and future-proof with the web. We had HTML, CSS, and that was basically, both of them are resilient. Both of them cannot be broken. A CSS selector that is invalid just gets skipped and the next one gets applied. A JavaScript error is basically the end of the code, like, no, I don't want to play with you anymore, go in the corner and be annoyed with you. This is always every conference you see this, like, ooh, the Space Jam website from 1998, or 1990 something. 98, I think, is still the same thing, and it works in all the browsers. It's still terrible code. It's still a website that we don't need, but it's a lot nostalgia that people say, like, that's what the web was like. And to a degree, it was. But the problem with openness and resilience is that they're both gift and curse. Because if we allow everything from that time still to be displayed in a new browser, we have to bloat those browsers. I worked on 3 browsers so far, and the amount of stuff we have to put in browsers not to break the web of the past is terrible, and that makes the things bloated and slow. So web tech was terrible, and we kind of hacked our way through. This is like basically what we looked like. We hammered on things and hoped everything worked out. And we needed to be forgiving. That's one part of the web that made it the way it is, to allow people to be on it. Anyone is allowed to write code for the web or use whatever they want to create that code. You can use a text editor, you can use Word, you can use, I don't know, Dreamweaver, whatever you want to do to export HTML, and the browser should do something with it. Users shouldn't suffer from developer errors. So basically, if something goes wrong in your development environment, users should not see nothing. That's what XHTML was. One simple encoding error in your page and nothing would show up. So the end user would be punished for your sloppy coding, and that's not what we want. Legacy product will never get fixed. Every single time I worked for a company, they're like, yeah, I know this is terrible, but we fix it next month. It's a lie. You never get the chance to fix it next month. It's going to be haunting your CV for the rest of your life. And you can't break the web. As browser makers, we cannot break the web. We have to swallow all of that terrible code and do something with it. And that led to years of technical debt. A lot of stuff, a lot of the slowness and the annoyance of the web is because we have technical debt of the past that basically, like, okay, by now we can kind of get rid of Flash, but not really. And Silverlight is still needed for some things, and all these crappy things have to be in our platform, not to break what we've done in the past. So I hope that by now we realize we should be, when we go into the future, we should be making more quality products and not just products for the sake of getting them out of the door quickly. And that needs arrogance, and that needs us as developers to stand up to business and say, like, no, I'm not going to release this because it's rubbish. And when they don't do it, find another job. Microsoft is hiring. It's all good. So the web of today is slow and annoying. It basically is, the average website is 2.2 meg, which on roaming costs me like 12 euros, so it probably be as good as a movie, because I'm not going to load that thing and go there. And we have lots of tracking going on there. We've got lots of third-party JavaScript that slows down our experience. And we also we go to our website, and the first thing it asks us to download the app instead. And you're like, what? You know, I came here by decision. I wanted to see what you have to offer. I don't want you to send me to yet another thing that you offer. Or when it asks for notifications immediately, just buy me a beer first, you know? I don't know you. Why should I get you in my address book? And it's kind of odd that the web is so fat and slow, because most users are now on mobile devices on really, really terrible connections and unreliable connections. And that's something we have to face, that the next users that we're gonna be reaching out to, no matter what we do in software, are gonna be on mobile devices. And that's partly because of infrastructure. Most of the places where internet is not there have already mobile internet because they have no cables in the ground, or it's too hard to put them in there. So it is up to us to clean this mess up to a degree. Developing software products, to me, is a service to our users. Our users don't own us anything. We cannot tell them to use another browser. We cannot tell them to use another operating system. We cannot tell them to buy a $2,000 phone before they can actually look at the two jumping, colorful things we coded. We cannot tell them to not be blind. We cannot tell them to know our language because we only release it in that language in a format that cannot be translated. So we are delivery service to users. They're the ones who make us money. They pay for our software, they click on our ads, they actually give us their information, they show us their love, and we should give them more love back and not just think about ourselves, about how it's cool for us. We all profited from years of let's see what works, and we accumulated a lot of mess that way. And I think it's time to be more responsible as creators of software products, and that means we're not a rock star, ninja, or code warrior. I hate these terms. Every time somebody says, like, are you a rock star developer, I just trash a cubicle and throw a TV out of the window, and I'm like, you wanted a rock star, right? Ninja are supposed to be invisible. You know, as soon as you see them, they're shit. So it's a terrible idea. And the whole, like, being the code warrior to change things is a terrible thing as well. Steve Jobs once said it, maybe the warriors who get the glory, but it's the engineers who build societies. So being the innovator, being the one that breaks the mold and does something amazing is cool. But engineers build societies that can use the products that we do. They build the roads that we have. They build the bridges that get us over water. And we're software engineers to allow people to use a medium like the internet or a medium like their mobile phone and trust it with their data and trust it with their information without being fooled. Of course, this wasn't Steve Jobs, but it was actually B'Elanna Torres from Star Trek. But when you put Steve Jobs there, people trust it more for some reason. I think it's unfair. B'Elanna needs more love. She was good. So astronauts are actually users empowered by engineers. And I forgot to put a space in there because I changed that slide 10 minutes ago. This is the director of the Apollo flight, computer programming, Margaret Hamilton. And this is the printout of the code that landed us on the moon. If you're bored, that's on GitHub and you can read through it. It's assembly language written by IBM on a, I don't know what the machine was, but it actually is quite fun that this is the amount of code that got us on the moon. And let's not forget that we had like rockets exploding because people used a semicolon too many, or forgot a semicolon. So don't tell me they don't care about semicolons. But it's always quite fun when people say like, oh, it was a woman. And you're like, yeah, duh. We can only build products for people when we are a diverse crowd of developers as well. We cannot build things for ourselves because we don't use our products. So we got to make sure that everybody is involved in that coding thing. So it was never easier to get started. That's the cool thing nowadays. When I started as a web developer, I basically had nothing. We had 0 and 1, and sometimes I had to use the O when the 0 got stuck. No, we didn't. But there was not much documentation out there. There was nothing like GitHub, where we actually have a social platform to talk to each other and get our code there. And even Git as version controlling, making sure you don't have to name folders and files being like final version, final version, final real version, this is the version you should be using kind of thing. It makes so much more sense to have something like Git to get started with. We have the Mozilla Web Docs or the MDN Web Docs, which are maintained by Mozilla, by Microsoft, by Google, by Adobe, by other people as well. We found out this is the one place to use, so let's all contribute to that one rather than just all making our own documentation and getting it outdated. There's CodePen for getting inspiration for great stuff. There's JSBin for trying things out without having to install lots of environments. There's also Glitch to build apps with, to actually not have to install your own node environment and all kind of things. So Glitch is being used by Google a lot lately, weirdly enough. And of course, there's editors that are written in a language that you can mess with them, and I friggin' love that. I write TypeScript, and the editor that I use is written in TypeScript, so I can actually extend the editor to my needs. I understand the code. The whole concept of when I started as a developer of downloading some software like Adobe Photoshop, no idea how that thing works, no idea how to do something with it. I had to wait for the next version to actually get a certain feature that I wanted to have in it. And nowadays, all of our platforms, all of our software environments are open for us to extend and to get new information in and get new functionality in. The problem is, though, soon after you got super excited about how easy it is to become a web developer, you realize that you need to know a lot more. It's not about the code, it's actually about more than that. You need to know about performance. As said, most of our end users are on terrible mobile devices in unreliable connections like the one here right now. Accessibility. We got to make sure that our system doesn't lock people out, that our products are not usable by people with certain disabilities or even certain access restrictions. Interoperability. We got to make sure that it works on all the platforms. Of course, you can only release on one platform, but I think this is so 1980s, isn't it? Like, it drives me nuts that I have a 4-year-old iPod that I cannot download a Kindle for because it's not available for that one anymore. Kindle is a friggin' PDF reader. I can write that in JavaScript. It's not a massive piece of software that needs something amazing from the device. But we outdate devices much faster than they should be. And I mean, for me, an iPod is not problematic, but other people have to spend a month's wage on getting their first tablet, for their first iPod, these kind of things. Security is another big problem. We're far too lax with security, and we've given up on it to a degree. 50 million accounts from Facebook basically got out there. Okay, can happen. What? No, it can't. I'm sorry. This is bad. This is terrible. And I want analysis why it happened. I want insight on what went wrong and what went there. So I stopped using comments on my blog years ago. I stopped asking people for logging into something because I don't want to own your data. I don't want to be responsible for it. You should be responsible for it. That's why I love that we have biometric logins in JavaScript now as well. I can use my fingerprint on my camera as a two-factor authentication together with a PIN to log in. I want the operating system to do that stuff for me. I don't want to control any of that because I've seen too often that PHP tutorials, for example, told you to chmod 777 a folder because then everything is easier. Yeah, for everybody. Maintainability is something we don't think about. We roll it out, we use the newest framework, it's pretty cool, and then we actually just, well, it's not going to be maintained by somebody else, somebody below my pay grade. And it's not fun to maintain software. It's really not fun to get into a product that has been messed up and your job is to clean it up. Other than that, we need to know browser quirks. This is getting better. It used to be like the main knowledge of me was like how to know which browser messes up how. And nowadays, this is much easier because browsers are evergreen. Developer toolchains. This is using broccoli with Safari and blah and 10,000 words, and it's interjecting with the other word that I don't know, and you're like, what? I just want to write some CSS. How is that happening here? Browser developer tools. They become rather complex as well. They look like IDEs nowadays. And abstractions, of course. I use Sass, I don't use CSS. I use TypeScript, I don't use JavaScript. What do all these things mean? Where do I get into those? And then the command line interface, of course, which always cracks me up. Everybody's like, you're so powerful on the terminal. And I'm like, yeah, I was powerful on the terminal in 1982. It's like, maybe it's too much power that we give the terminal, that we're excited in 2018 that you have a 1970s Unix simulation on our machine running as the main interface. Maybe we should have something more visual that allows you to drag and drop things and build code that way. Not Visual Basic, no, not good things. You know, we should think about more like how do we design our code that we actually get to the end users. And editors as well, and all of them can be changed, and it's very important what kind of theme you use. It's much more important what kind of font you use rather than like that you write code. We have like hours and hours of Stack Overflow discussions, which is the best theme to use in your editor. So where do you learn all that? There's several things that are getting there, and none of them actually do the right work, I think. Standards documentation, well, this is hard to read. Browser vendor docs, they might be actually tainted by the browser vendor's ideas of what the internet should be. Conferences, not everybody can afford them. Books, they're outdated by the time you print them, which is, it's great that you have books that are basically not dealing with topics that are up to date, but if you have a bleeding edge book, that's basically the wrong format, I'm sorry. Workshops, they're expensive, not everybody can scale to those. Developer tools, they become also tainted by the idea what a developer company does. And news channels, sometimes they're just hyped as well. I like RSS, I get most of my information from RSS feeds, from blogs and from news sites. I don't actually go to Twitter for information because it's full of Trump stuff and I don't want to go there. So the learning obstacles that we make ourselves are there as well. We have resources with upvoting, and that favor the how over the why. On Stack Overflow, the like, here's how to do it without thinking about it, will be the winner. Not the like, here's how to do it, but this could happen, and here's a problem with that, and here's that, that's too complex, I don't want to have this answer. We're not paid to learn, we're paid to deliver. We're actually meant to deliver code. We're not paid to actually hang out in Stack Overflow and learn things. Peer pressure makes us developers who don't know things afraid to admit it. I hate that at conferences when like, everybody knows that? Of course everybody would put their hand up because they don't want to be known in this group to be the person who doesn't know it. I'm happy to admit on stage that I don't know things, and you should be too. Don't feel pressured into having to know everything. And there's always a good enough way to create a lot in a short amount of time. So tooling and insights on how our code works are great. That basically we have these things in browsers now that show you in a flame chart what's happening, when something's happening, and we should be optimizing with it as well. I don't see it much in use though. I still see these terribly badly performing websites out there. And I think the problem is that they're actually not in context. You have to learn a lot about developer tools to use them properly. Of course, that's our tools. We should be using those. But I think it's out of the context where I'm coding right now, where I'm doing things. So having information isn't enough when people don't go there. It's like I don't go to the web fundamentals of Google all the time. I don't go MDN all the time while I'm coding. I don't have time for that. I used to have them open in another tab, but nowadays you're actually using in your node environment, you don't get the answers there. And we need to prevent mistakes before they happen. Debugging is great, but how about we stop people making terrible code before we actually debug? Why do we have to jump from coding to debugging to coding to debugging all the time? That's a lot of effort for us mentally to do. So we need to allow people to customize the experiences. A best practice in a developer tool might not be applicable to you. An intranet site has different settings than a marketing site. So when a linting tool tells you you should be using that, it doesn't apply to my product, so it shouldn't be an error. It shouldn't be a noise in my error flow. I should be allowed to customize those things. So I think targeting editors and build processes is something that I'm doing a lot right now because that's what we do, that's what we're using. So we might as well use them for quality, not only for making faster and releasing more code. The first things were like Atom and Sublime Text and other editors that do linting inline. So here it tells me all the things that I've done wrong in my CSS while I'm writing my CSS. It puts squiggly lines under it, much like Word puts squiggly lines under a word that I typed the wrong way. How cool is that? I never get embarrassed enough to push this into production and people say like your CSS is wrong because you never get a chance to write wrong CSS because your editor prevents you from doing that in the first place. WebHint is a product that is by the JS Foundation, so it's actually supported by several companies out there. And it's really interesting because in WebHint we put like 20 years of, well, 15 years of best practices and we put them in a tool. So what you do is you go there, you put a URL of your product in there, and then you get a report on the issues, on the accessibility issues, interoperability issues, performance issues, PWA readiness, and security. And you can click through them and get explanations why they are issues and how to fix them. Not that they are issues and you hope to know what it means. We put the documentation in the error report. And that makes so much more sense because that way you don't make that mistake the second time because you know now why it was a problem, not it was a problem. Duh. You got to fix it somehow. You get in-depth explanations on the issues as well. There's lots of documentation being written, and please contribute to that. It's on GitHub, so we actually can open it to you. And it's not just a website, because a website is great, but it doesn't scale to production. This is great for doing reports when third-party companies build things for you, and you tell them, like, actually, that's terrible. And they're like, no, our developers are great. And I'm like, here's why it's terrible, and here's how to fix it. Much easier than having, like, 10,000 emails go back and forth. You can also install it as an NPM module in your build and development process. So that way, you can test the setup of your bundles and these kind of things as well in production directly. So it's just hint in NPM, and you can hint example.com, and you get the report directly in the command line, or you can have an Excel sheet, or you can have an HTML report, and all the kind of things. So that could be part of your process before you put something live. And that should be the benefit of actually testing for these things without having to think about them. Out of the box, it tests for performance, accessibility, PWA readiness, development environment setup, is your bundler creating 20 megabyte of JavaScript, interoperability, and security. Security is using SNCC as a third-party product, accessibility is using Axe as a third-party product, but you can customize all of that as well. So if you don't care about PWA readiness of your product because it's only an intranet site, you can turn that off. And you can turn that off with a JSON file that basically says to configuration file. And you can also do it interactively on the command line by just using an npm hint. And that way it gives you, do you want to do this, and then it creates a new hint for you. So don't go with the things that are out of the box. Customize that to your needs and your products. We use it in Microsoft because we got lots of intranet sites, enterprise sites, customer-facing sites. We've got all these different environments where the normal linting tools told us far too many things that don't make sense. So we built something that is much more focused on what we need. So how about preventing people to make errors in the first place? As it's an npm module, you can actually put it inside an editor as well. So now, as a web hint, there's a code extension, you can actually type your things, and it tells you the errors while you're typing in your code. So it does, if it realizes it's a manifest, it tells you what's wrong with your web app manifests. If it's a tooling setup, it says like you want to have ES3, you should do ES5 because you don't need all these JavaScript bundling anymore. Or even in terms of accessibility, it tells you like this should have an alternative text and it doesn't have any. And this is while you're coding, so you never get the chance to make mistakes. And I wished I had that 15 years ago. I would have written a lot less terrible code. We're working right now in a much different web than we used to. The web is ubiquitous. It's everywhere. Everything has a web connectivity. My telephone, my water cooler, everything is basically connected. IoT devices. The S in IoT stands for security, by the way. But we're not appreciating it anymore because we just see it as a given. We don't care about water coming out of the drain and what's happening with the drainage plumbing system. We just assume that water will come out. I used to live in India for a while. I couldn't drink the water. When I came back to Europe, I'm like, this is friggin' amazing. I want to learn why it's so clean. I want to understand what's going on. But we don't do that with the web anymore. We just expect it to be there. And the web is under attack right now. It's up to us who benefited from the web as an open communication platform to kind of defend it. There's really stupid laws in Europe about the link tags and the upload filter, which is like, that's impossible to become a publisher anymore that way. And I wouldn't mind if those things were there to prevent illegal stuff to go on the internet, like terrible things that should not be on the internet, but it's all about copyright infringement and uploading videos that are copyrighted. And this just drives me nuts that a 200-year-old idea like copyright is holding a platform like the web back. In America, we got, of course, the net neutrality problem. And I love it that they actually take action to restore internet freedom. The internet freedom of people to actually give slow connections to those who can't afford it and fast connections and more content to those who can. The internet is for everybody, not only for rich people. So net neutrality was a big blow to our idea of what we're trying to do here. And of course, the global internet is also attacked by sharks, and there's video proof. So you got to make sure that you do something about those sharks. So are we too late? I mean, a former Google chief says that the internet was split by 2028, a Chinese web and an American one. And I don't want to live in that world. I want to have the European web as well. I want to have the African web. I want to have the Indian web. I want everybody to be part of this beautiful platform that enables us to actually become better. But no, it's all about the commercial stuff. Those are the ones that make money with it, so those are the ones that will control everything. Please, let's not make that happen. So our accumulated insights are a great starting point. We accumulate a lot of knowledge on how to do web the right way. And we forgot about them. It was blog posts from 20 years ago. So instead of reiterating this knowledge and telling people you got to start with HTML and validate your thing, just make it a base to start from. Let's take this knowledge that we've done, and instead of having code that is unmaintainable, take the knowledge and put it directly into the production environments. So our technology stack has evolved from a text editor and terrible browser to amazing tools. We actually use build scripts, we use proper version controlling, we use editors that are open and hackable. So let's introduce new people to this web of them early on as part of the development setup. When somebody wants to become a developer, give them an editor that makes sense, introduce them to version controlling. And all the courses that I'm doing right now for beginners are doing that. Not like, you can use whatever you want. Yeah, you can, but then you create crap. Let's make sure that we actually create things that we're proud of and we actually can use later on as well. It's kind of cool to be an engineer. NASA has them. Nothing should stop you from building wild and cool things. be as crazy as you want to be in your stuff that you want to build. But thinking about code as a career, maybe it's time to concentrate on making what we do more reliable and not just have to start from scratch every single time we get on a new project. And if we stop writing bloated and short-lived solutions that can be maintained, we free ourselves to explore the universe and maybe have a life outside of our job, maybe have a side job where we do creative coding, all these things. But we gotta be better at delivering products that people can use rather than hoping nobody finds our mistakes. And that's all I had, so thanks very much. So apparently there's no announcement now. I'm just here to tell you that there's a 10-minute break now and get the hell out. And I'm here for the whole day. I'm here half the other day tomorrow, please. We're speakers, we're humans. We actually can be talked to, and we're actually not gods and we're not astronauts, so please don't feel shy about talking to us. If you speak French, do it slow. But we're here to help you, and please have a wonderful day exploring what's coming onto you, because this seems to be a great conference to start with, becoming a better developer. Thank you.